Geraint Jenkins. I'm the new CEO for Cartrefi Cymru. I've only been in post 3 months in this role, and Adrian handed over to me back in February. Adrian, who I'm sure some of you have met along the way, a big cooperative, influence in Wales for certainly the social care space. So he's retired and he's not disappeared. He's still in the background helping out, but he's handed over the CEO role to me 3 months ago. Cartrefi Cymru was formed in the late 80s when the agenda changed and we were out closing long stay institutions, and we were set up in the late 80s to support primarily young adults with learning disabilities and support them to resettle from long stay institutions into community home settings. That's what we were set up to do by a group of activists and family members at the time that weren't content with the state provision. Cartrefi Cymru grew quite quickly then across Wales, focusing mainly initially on rural parts of Wales, and then that turned into supporting most of Wales, and we currently work in 18 out of the 22 local authority areas in Wales. Like I said, primarily supporting adults with learning disabilities, but we do have a small segment of our service which is based in North Wales in Gwynedd, which is older people's home care, which is what the topic this evening is about. And we've been involved in some pilots and redesigning home care with Gwynedd over the last few years. So that's where our sort of view on this paper and the future of domiciliary care comes in. I think there's lots to do and lots of opportunities and risks there that we're keen on having a view on and talking about. So that's Cartrefi Cymru. In 2016, we changed from not just being a social care not-for-profit organisation, and we changed our governance to become a multi-stakeholder cooperative as well, as a not-for-profit agency in 2016. And so that means all the people we support, all of our workforce and community supporters and people who support the organisation from outside can all be members of our cooperative and appoint our councillor members who appoint our board. So there's a sort of governance oversight there. And we've got a sort of network of cooperative forums across the organisation that are used as vehicles to help us consult and make decisions when we need to and give us feedback on how the organisation is running, but also to organise ourselves to do some meaningful sort of community building, added value activity in the local authority areas that we work as well. So that's a bit about Cartrefi Cymru, and we're here to talk about the ADSS feasibility report. Just curious, how many people have had a chance to read it from the people on the call? Is there?
I read about half of it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fine.
Sorry.
No worries. Okay, so the background and purpose of the feasibility study is in response basically to no secret that social care for older people is struggling in Wales. It's creaking, and some believe it's at sort of breaking point and has been for some time. The report references significant worker shortage, which isn't just an older people services issue. That's across sector, across all of social care and health services as an issue. But there is, disproportionate knock-on effect. Older people services are having more of an impact on the NHS and other services as a result of them services struggling. Recruitment and retention is cited as a big contributor, which isn't wrong. That's definitely correct. There is a shortage of workers in Wales, and the report cited at the time 5,000 staff are needed to fulfil the current demand for older people services on top of the current workforce. And they sort of roughly, equated that to 4 million care hours not being delivered each year. They've also, at the time, had numbers indicating 1,500 people waiting for care, and a third of them are likely to have been waiting more than 3 months. Some of them most likely in hospitals too. And to be fair, that story's, that story is similar in most of Wales. Will have local authorities that are struggling in all of them areas. They will have unmet need, they will have people stuck in hospital, and they will have a shortage of workforce, and that's different in different bits of Wales, but it's a struggle all round. So the idea was that they were going to look at exploring whether there's room for a national franchise to provide older people services in Wales in a sort of attempt to meet social objectives and do a bit of improvement across the sector, try and reduce costs and allow that saving to be pumped back into terms and conditions and wages in order to get recruitment moving. And try and build in some sort of cooperative principles into that model. And technology has been cited a lot through the report around some of the difficulties the sector's had with technology and shared services, and whether that was a real opportunity to make some efficiencies and get some consistency across Wales in them areas. So the structure of the organisation they're proposing, and there's a few options in the report, and they sort of, they're all centred around a franchise model, but varying degrees of control in the franchise licence. But basically, the franchise would be an entity, and they've cited the ability of either a local authority or an existing cooperative or an existing sort of third sector organisation to be the host, to be that franchisor, and then they would be responsible for licensing and coordinating services. And then there would be a network of franchisees, which are all types of domiciliary care providers in Wales, focus on accessibility and financial stability. What they seem to be keen on is adoption from the sector, not just new providers setting up new services under the franchise arrangement, but actually having some of the sector convert themselves into the franchisee model in order to have access to that national host and the shared services that they're hoping to sort of build into that model. So the report talks about integration with national and local initiatives, standardised care and reduced duplication in services, and it does that in a few different ways through the report, but it doesn't quite sort of get to under the skin of, well, I suppose it recognises the complexities of social care and how it's currently configured across Wales, and older people services are heavily reliant on the private sector. And the report does go into a bit of a breakdown and explains how much support is being delivered by the private sector, how much by the third sector, and how much by sort of local authorities themselves and maybe some health services. It's very heavy in the private sector. And there's definitely opportunities there for the third sector to be doing more, providing the model is sustainable, which is the main reason I think third sector organisations haven't heavily supported that space, especially when you contrast it to sort of the space that Cartrefi started out in. Learning disability services is almost the complete opposite. We are heavily supported by the third sector in Wales for learning disability services, but not older people. And they talk about a gradual approach to the franchise, with this long-term view of having almost a national service across older people services, and they recognise that that's not going to be something that's going to happen quickly, and they want to focus on a slow adoption and build confidence along the way in order to encourage more of the sector to come across to the franchise model. So they talked about the financial investment, and there's lots of sort of breakdowns in costings in the report. If you want to sort of dive through them, it goes into sort of where they see the 50 million coming from, and and where they intend to spend the initial investment. So they talk about an £800,000 initial investment in order to set the organisation, the host organisation up, and then a year two investment of £250,000. And then from there on, they're anticipating that the licensing fees and the revenue generated from the model will start to pay for the franchisee host organisation from there on in. The investment looked a little bit light from my view, and the 50 million anticipated savings. It's a little bit sort of optimistic in my view when you look at where they're sort of anticipating them savings from, but there's some very smart people who've written this report, and the agencies they consulted with may have intelligence to suggest that that's a really solid move. I suppose what we'd have to caveat that with is if it did realise more delivery, because if the franchise model did work and did move recruitment in the way that they hope, that actually delivery would go up as you meet the unmet need. So it will be interesting to see how that pans out in terms of budget and how local authorities respond to the spend. So some of the challenges they've cited in the report are, legal and operational complexities. It's a franchise model, and they're proposing that there's no stipulation on the franchisees being not-for-profits or profit-making. They've said that either should be viable. So it's an interesting view to have, where you're operating a national service and some organisations are still operating for profit and some organisations aren't, particularly with the sort of the legislation and the ambition in Wales in other areas of social care, children's services being the obvious one. That the profit is sort of being discouraged in social care, profit-making organisations. There's a realisation that actually it's really probably a too big a step for older people services to jump from heavily profit-making organisations to the other way. That's going to take some time, and it'll be interesting to see how they run parallel under a host organisation in the meantime. Need for clear and measurable standards highlighted in the report, and there's still in the report where they've sort of flatlined the ambition to have a set rates and set standards. There's still likely going to be a minimum set standard, and where you'll see not-for-profits and profit-making organisations, you might see not-for-profits invest their surplus into improving standards, and profit-making organisations retain their profit and choose not to do some of that work. So it'll be interesting to see how that would play out. Potential for transformative impact on the sector. It definitely does have potential for widespread improvement, and it is one of the options we should be looking at. And I think it's great that people are looking at a response to the crisis, because it feels very fractured and very fragile at the moment out in that space. Most local authorities we're working with are citing older people services being the main pressure point across the whole social care portfolio. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what they're trying to do. Some of the sort of conclusion and reflections I've had from the report is the governance structure was interesting. They talk about it being a cooperative, but actually they settle on it, the recommendation being not a cooperative in governance structure, that actually it's an organisation set up using cooperative principles, which in my view might not go quite as far as it needs to. If you wanted to share citizen control and power with either users or the workforce or both, you might need a governance structure that's got that cooperative sort of mechanism in there, baked into it. Like I said earlier, the for-profit and the third sector, what happens to the marketplace? The report sort of says that the unmet need that's in the sector, that's in Wales, it is sort of an opportunity for for organisations to start popping up under the franchise model and start meeting that need. And although that is the case, and that could be possible, there's no real recognition that actually the unmet need is probably the trickier stuff to deliver. So the older people space is quite logistically challenging, particularly in its current format of delivery. And so that unmet lump of need that's out there is likely to be, people with either really complex needs in rurally challenging areas, and difficult for current provision to pick up. And so it might be a difficult penetration angle for new providers, particularly if they're going into the marketplace alongside, a very settled, delivery that's sort of soaked up all the dense and easy to deliver contracts. That's a tricky prospect for any new organisation entering the market. So I think I've covered everything I want to do. So, and yeah, it doesn't go, the other bit that's kind of missing through the report, it's kind of hinted to, and it might be a longer term aspiration for the report, because some of this experimenting wasn't sort of really taken hold at the time the report was being written. But there are lots of really nice examples across Wales now where the delivery model being used to deliver older people services is being experimented with and trying things instead of time and task. So the delivery for home care, the model hasn't really changed for a long time since it was, evolved from the home health kind of space, and is very much dictated by, small amounts of time for a set amount of tasks, which sort of breaks up time into really small units, which make it really difficult to deliver in a sort of values-based way. And there's lots of experimenting to shift away from that across Wales. And so it would be interesting to see if there was to be a national franchise, whether they could be a vehicle for improving the delivery model as well as just, keeping up with delivery in the traditional sense. The reality is that without uber investment in frontline wages and conditions, it seems a really difficult task to grow the social care workforce to the scale that's needed to meet this unmet demand without us being able to do more with less. And so a shift away from time and task and a more demand-based model might give us the space to pay people more, but also meet demand without needing all of that workforce. The workforce is pretty saturated. That everyone who wants or has a desire to work in social care in Wales is probably already doing it, or has a really clear, fairly easy route to get there. And so we need lots of investment in encouraging others to join the sector, but also valuing and encouraging the staff we have got to stay and do that in a very sort of trust-based model of delivery instead of the high pressure sort of time and task space we're in now. So they're my thoughts on the report, and I'll stop sharing my screen now because we can head into some discussion. Or if anyone's got any questions on anything I've said.